Behind the luxurious gates of the elite community and beyond the gates, power and prestige have long been used to conceal the past. For Kat, that world once felt like a place where she could finally build a future. She believed she had found stability, purpose, and a connection that seemed genuine. But everything began to unravel the day a forgotten document surfaced and quietly shattered the fragile reality she had been living in. It began with something small and seemingly insignificant, a birth record buried deep within an old hospital archive. The document was worn and almost overlooked among hundreds of files destined to be forgotten. Yet one name written across the page stopped Kat cold. It triggered a distant, fragmented memory of a woman who had appeared briefly in the earliest moments of her childhood before disappearing from her life forever. At first, the discovery felt like coincidence, but an uneasy feeling settled in Kat's mind. Questions about her origin, questions she had tried to silence for years, suddenly forced their way back to the surface. Driven by an instinct she could not ignore, Kat began searching for more information. The deeper she dug, the more unsettling the pieces became. The record did not describe a single birth. It described two children born on the same day, to the same mother, under circumstances that appeared strangely altered. Notes in the file hinted at identity changes, sealed documentation, and an unusual transfer of guardianship immediately after birth. One child had remained under the protection of a powerful and influential family. The other had disappeared entirely from the system, erased as though that life had never existed. The realization came slowly, but when it finally took shape, it hit Kat with devastating force. The child who had been kept within that powerful family was Tomas. The one erased from every official record was her. The revelation tore through Kat's understanding of her own life. Memories that once felt ordinary now seemed distorted, as though they had been built on a foundation of lies. Her past suddenly looked less like a series of unfortunate coincidences and more like the result of deliberate decisions made by people who had never cared about the consequences for her. Anger and disbelief surged together inside her, leaving her struggling to reconcile the truth with the life she thought she knew. Yet the most painful discovery was still waiting for her. While tracing the path of the hidden documents, Kat uncovered something even more disturbing. Internal records connected to the powerful family suggested that the truth about the second child had not been completely buried. Some members of the family had known about it for years. The secret had been quietly protected, guarded by silence and influence. Among those who knew the truth was Tomas. When Kat realized that fact, the emotional shock turned into something far more violent. Betrayal flooded through her. The pain was no longer just about the family that had erased her existence. It was about Tomas, the person who had stood closest to her while knowing a truth that could have changed everything. For Tomas, discovering the truth years earlier had been like watching the foundation of his world crack apart. The family he had always trusted suddenly revealed a darker side, one built on fear, reputation, and ruthless decisions. The moment he understood that he had a sister hidden from the world was the moment he realized that his family's legacy was far more fragile than he had believed. In that moment, Tomas faced a choice he never wanted to confront. Revealing the truth would mean destroying everything his family had spent decades building, their name, their influence. Their carefully protected image, remaining silent, however, meant allowing an unforgivable injustice to continue. Fear and loyalty won that battle. At first, Tomas convinced himself the evidence might be incomplete. Perhaps the records were wrong. Perhaps the truth was more complicated than it seemed. But as the years passed and the proof became impossible to ignore, his silence turned from uncertainty into a deliberate decision. The situation became far more dangerous when Kat entered his life again. Her presence forced Tomas to face the truth every single day. Every interaction reminded him of the secret he was hiding. Part of him wanted to end the deception and reveal everything before it was too late. But another part feared the destruction that would follow if the truth came out. That fear slowly transformed into paranoia. Tomas began watching Kat's movements more carefully, sensing that her curiosity about her past was growing stronger. Each question she asked felt like a step closer to disaster. He realized that a single mistake could bring the entire structure of secrecy crashing down. When Kat began investigating old records and contacting people connected to the past, Tomas felt the situation slipping beyond his control. Panic replaced caution. Instead of confronting the truth, he began trying to contain it. Documents that once existed in hospital archives suddenly vanished. Administrative records were quietly altered. Individuals who had once been connected to the original events found themselves transferred, silenced, or removed from positions where they might be questioned. The interference was subtle but persistent, enough to slow Kat's search without revealing who was responsible. But the manipulation only intensified Kat's determination. Each obstacle confirmed her growing suspicion that someone powerful was trying to keep the truth hidden. The more resistance she encountered, the more personal the search became. This was no longer just about discovering where she came from. It had become a fight to understand why her life had been erased in the first place. The anger building inside her grew sharper with every discovery. She began to see her entire life through a new lens. The struggles she had endured, the sense of displacement she had always felt, the unanswered questions that haunted her childhood, all of it now seemed like the result of a deliberate act of cruelty. She refused to turn back. As Kat continued assembling the fragments of the past, the final pieces eventually fell into place. The truth was undeniable. She and Tomas shared the same mother. Decades earlier, a scandal had threatened to destroy the reputation of a powerful family. To prevent that disgrace, a decision had been made that changed two lives forever. One child would remain within the family, protected by wealth and influence. The other would disappear completely. The knowledge did not bring relief. Instead, it left Kat feeling as though her entire identity had been manipulated by strangers who valued reputation more than humanity. Meanwhile, Tomas felt the walls closing in around him. Every attempt he had made to contain the secret was beginning to unravel. Kat had reached the point where the truth could no longer be hidden. The weight of his choices finally began to crush him. He understood that his silence had helped create the catastrophe now unfolding. If he had revealed the truth earlier, the damage might have been contained. Instead, years of secrecy had allowed the situation to grow into something far more destructive. Now there were no safe options left. On one side stood the family that had raised him, a legacy bound to power, status, and expectations. that had defined his entire life. On the other stood Cat, the living embodiment of the truth he had tried to bury. Those two realities could not coexist. Whispers of the past began spreading quietly through the community. Suspicion turned into curiosity. Questions started to surface about events that had long been ignored. The image of perfection surrounding the powerful family began to crack under the pressure of rumors. Kat now faced a decision as cruel as the one Tomas had once faced. Revealing the truth could expose the people responsible for stealing her life and force them to answer for what they had done. But doing so would also ignite a scandal capable of destroying Tomas along with them. Tomas, in turn, found himself trapped in the consequences of his own silence. Every path forward promised devastation. The secret he had tried to protect had grown too large to contain. Behind the grand gates that symbolized power and prestige, a truth buried for decades was beginning to break through the surface. And once it fully emerged, the world that had been carefully constructed to hide it might collapse entirely, leaving no one untouched by the fallout.